What happens when she becomes the breadwinner and the culture hasn't updated the script? Welcome back to BWISE, Black Women in Sports Excellence, and this is Controlling Interest, PoliSports Tea Leaves, where we don't just follow the headline, we read the pattern, the power, and the politics shaping the business of women's sports. I'm your host, Political Lil, and this is episode 3 of our Tea Leaves mini-series, The Rise of Sports Power Couple, where we break down the why behind the shift, not just what you're seeing on the surface. Today we're stepping into a conversation that's uncomfortable, overdue, and quietly reshaping the entire ecosystem of athletics and relationships within it. Because here's the reality. Women in sports are no longer waiting their turn. They're not just participating, they're profiting. From NIL deals to league expansion to media rights and brand building, women athletes, especially Black women, are entering spaces of financial power that has historically excluded them. And that's where the disruption begins. Because while the money is moving, while the visibility is growing, while the business of women's sports is accelerating at a historic pace, the culture, the expectations, the relationship dynamics, they're still operating on the same old script. A script that was built on men as providers. A script that never anticipated women, especially athletes, becoming the economic engine. A script that struggles to reconcile power, identity, masculinity, femininity, and control. So now we're watching something unfold in real time. An economic inversion, where women are rising financially, but the emotional, rational, and cultural infrastructure hasn't caught up. And when systems don't evolve with reality, they produce tension, they produce conflict, they produce correction mechanisms. That's what we're reading today. Because this isn't just about money, this is about power alignment. Who holds it, who controls it, who is expected to lead, and who is expected to adjust. And more importantly, what happens when those expectations are flipped? In this episode, we're going to break down how economic shift is impacting relationships, locker rooms, public narratives, and the broader sports economy. And why what looks like personal issues on the surface are often structural realities underneath. So grab your tea, because the leaves are talking. And if you're paying attention, they're telling you exactly where the game is going next. Let's start right here. Because before we get into relationships, tension, and power dynamics, we've got to establish the moment we're in. This is not theoretical anymore. This is happening right now. We are witnessing a financial shift in real time, and it's not subtle. First, NIL deals worth millions. College athletes, women athletes, are no longer just building resumes. They're building portfolios. We're talking about young women still in school securing endorsement deals that rival and in some cases surpass their male counterparts. And let's be clear, this isn't charity. This isn't feel-good marketing. This is market validation. Brands are making calculated investments because these women are driving engagement, commanding audiences, and delivering cultural influence. They are not just athletes anymore. They are assets. Second, the explosion of women's sports media. Visibility used to be the barrier. Now, it's becoming an accelerant. We're seeing expanded broadcast deals, increased sponsorship, sold-out arenas, and a record-breaking viewership number. Platforms that once ignored women's sports are now competing for access. Why? Because the audience showed up. And where attention goes, money follows. This isn't a moment of inclusion. This is a moment of monetization. And third, this is the most important shift of all. Women athletes are becoming brand CEOs. They're not waiting on leagues. They're not relying solely on team structure. They are building personal ecosystems, merchandise lines, media platforms, partnership, ownership stakes. They're learning leverage early. They understand their image is intellectual property. Their name is a business. Their platform is currency. And that changes everything. So when we say financial inversion at scale, that is what we mean. Women are no longer financially dependent within the sports ecosystem. In many cases, they are becoming the primary earners, the primary drivers, and the primary brand. And here's the part that people don't want to say out loud. The system wasn't built for this, not culturally, not relationally, and not psychologically. Because when the flow of money shifts, the flow of power shifts with it. And anytime power moves, something has to adjust. So as we move into this episode, I want you to hold on to this question. If women athletes are now stepping into financial dominance, what happens to the dynamics that were built on them not having it? That's the tension. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack next. Now that we've established the moment, let's read the signal. Because in every economic shift, there's always an underlying rule that doesn't change. Economic power has always dictated relational power. Whoever controls the money historically controls the decisions, the directions, and the dynamic. That's not new. What is new is who's holding that power. Because now she earns more. Not occasionally, not symbolically, but consistently in certain spaces. She gets more press, more visibility, more media attention, more cultural relevance. She negotiates contracts. She's sitting at the table. She understands the numbers. She's driving the deal. So now we've got a situation where the traditional levers of power are no longer aligned with traditional gender expectations. Because the old script was simple. Man earns, women support. That structure didn't just define finances, it defined identity. It defined who leads, who follows, who sacrifices, who adjusts. But now, the script is being rewritten in real time. Women scales, she expands, she builds, she multiplies her value. And now, man adjusts. And that right there, that's the pressure point. Because adjustment sounds simple on paper, but in practice, it's layered. It challenges identity, it challenges ego, it challenges social conditioning that's been reinforced for generations. Because if a man has been taught directly or indirectly that his value is tied to provision, what happens when he's no longer the primary provider? And if a woman has been conditioned to support, what happens when she becomes the one setting the pace? This is where real tension is born. Not because something is wrong, but because the roles change faster than the mindset. And when the mindset lags behind reality, you get friction. You get misalignment. You get silent competition, power struggles, and in some cases, resentment. So the tea leaf signal is clear. This isn't just about women making more money. This is about the reordering of power inside relationships in an industry that's being forced to evolve in public. And the real question becomes, can the relationship structure evolve at the same speed as the economics? Or does the pressure of that adjustment start to crack the foundation? That's where we're headed next. Now let's break this down from a power perspective. Because every shift creates winners and pressure points. So the question is simple. Who benefits from this economic inversion and who struggles to adapt to it? Let's start with the beneficiary. Corporate brand. They're winning big because they're tapping into a market that was undervalued for decades. Women athletes are delivering something brands are always chasing: authenticity, engagement, and cultural influence. And now they're getting it at scale. This isn't just endorsement anymore. This is strategic alignment. Brands are building long-term partnerships with women who are not only athletes, but storytellers, influencers, and business-minded leaders. Women athletes, clearly, but not just financially. They're gaining leverage in negotiations, leveraging visibility, leveraging how their stories are told and who gets to tell them. They're no longer waiting to be chosen. They're positioning themselves to choose. And then you have the rise of the entire new endorsement ecosystem. We're seeing alternative leads, player-driven media platforms, ownership models, and direct-to-consumer branding. The middleman is shrinking, and women athletes are learning how to operate as the hub, not just the product. That's a cultural, structural shift. But every gain on one side creates pressure on another. So who struggles? Men whose identity has been centered on provision. Not because they lack value, but because the definition of their value is being challenged. If provisions was the foundation, and now that foundation is no longer exclusive to them, then the question becomes, where do I fit in this structure now? That's not a small adjustment. That's an identity recalibration. And then there are families and relationships that were built on an outdated hierarchy. Structures where roles were clearly defined financially and socially. Those systems work as long as the conditions stayed the same. But now the conditions have changed. And those same structures are being asked to operate under entirely different economics without being redesigned. And let's be very clear about something. This is not about feminism. This is not a battle of men versus women. This is about structural lag. The economy has moved, the opportunities have expanded, the money has shifted. But the social framework, the expectations, the roles, the relational agreements, they haven't caught up yet. And when structure lags behind reality, it creates instability. Not because the shift is wrong, but because the system wasn't prepared for it. So what we're watching isn't just individual tension. It's a system trying to recalibrate in real time. And the question becomes, who adapts successfully? And who resists the shift and pays the price for it? That's where the real story starts to unfold. Now let's project this forward, because the tea leaves don't just tell us what is, they tell us what's coming next. And based on everything we're seeing, this shift is not slowing down, it's accelerating. So here's what you should expect: more dual athlete couples, more relationships where both individuals are operating in high performance, high visibility, high income spaces, which sound balanced on the surface, but introduces a new layer of complexity. Because now you've got two brands, two schedules, two public profiles, two financial engines operating in the same relationship. That's not traditional. That's a merger. More brand tension. Because when both individuals are monetized, everything becomes strategic. Who gets priority in a campaign? Whose schedule dictates movement? Whose brand aligns or conflicts with the other? And then this one. These aren't just personal decisions anymore. They're business decisions. And when relationships become intertwined with business, tension isn't a possibility, it's inevitable. And then this one. More quiet renegotiations at home. Not always public, not always dramatic, but constant. Conversation about roles, expectations, support leadership. Who travels, who compromises, who adjusts. These negotiations may not make headlines, but they are happening behind the scenes in real time. And here's the core issue driving all of it. If emotional literacy doesn't rise at the same pace as financial change, instability increases. If emotional literacy doesn't rise at the same pace as financial change, instability increases. Because money can shift dynamics overnight, but emotional intelligence, communication, identity security, adaptability, those take work. So if the economics evolve but the individuals don't, then what you get is misalignment. And misalignment over time turns into fracture. And this is where the deeper analysis comes in. Because to really understand this moment, we have to zoom out. We have to look at labor economics, how value is assigned, who gets paid, and why that's changing now. Historical gender norms in sport, how roles were constructed, reinforced, and protected over time. And NIL contract data, because the numbers don't lie. They tell us exactly where the leverage is shifting and how fast. Because what we're witnessing isn't random, it's structural, it's patterned, and it's predictable if you know how to read it. So as we move towards the close, I want you to sit with this. This isn't just about women rising, it's about systems adjusting to that rise, or failing to. And in that gap between change and adaptation, that's where the tension lives. That's where the stories come from. And that's exactly where we read the tea leaves. So let's bring this all the way in. What we've unpacked today isn't just a moment in sport. It's a shift in structure. We're watching women athletes step into unprecedented levels of financial power through NIL deals, media expansion, and brand ownership. We're seeing an economic inversion where women are no longer positioned as supporters within the system. They are becoming drivers of it. And with that shift comes a reordering of everything connected to it. Relationships, identity, power dynamics, expectations. We broke down the signal that money has always dictated power. And now the hands holding that power are changing. We analyze who benefits, corporate brands, women athletes, new endorsement ecosystems, and who feels the pressure, men navigating identity beyond provision, and relationships built on frameworks that no longer match the reality. And then we look ahead, more dual athlete couples, more brand-driven relationships, more quiet renegotiations happening behind closed doors. Because when money changes, the conversation changes. But here's the real takeaway. This is not conflict by accident. This is what happens when economics evolve faster than culture. When the numbers move, but the mindset doesn't. When power shifts, but the structure resists. And in that gap, that's where tension lives. That's where relationships are tested. That's where identity is challenged. And that's where the future gets decided. So if you're watching this space, don't just look at the headlines, look at the patterns. Because the tea leaves are not subtle. They're telling you exactly what's coming, who's adapting, who's resisting, and who's about to be left behind. Thank you for tapping into another episode of BWISE podcast series, Controlling Interest, PoliSports Tea Leaves. I'm your host, Political Lil. And remember, if the money rewrites the script, you better learn your new lines before the scene changes on you. Until next time.